Good morning, welcome to Quick and Early Miracles. This is number 13 or 14, and I am responding to actually the same question from several people in the crowd about managing anxiety and overthinking and being more present and letting go of the past. And this is a way to think about that experience in a way that helps it lose its grip. Good morning, hey guys. So if you have a topic still, I'm open to it, I want to hear it, and also I really appreciate the feedback, messages, comments, etc. about what's helpful, and if you're watching, so I know how to make the most of this for me and for you. So today we are talking about the experience of anxiety, worry, overthinking. Basically, you're kind of stressed out and you have a level of awareness that lets you believe that, or you think also about the state that maybe it shouldn't or couldn't be that way. So it's almost like you have this experience and then you have your experience about the experience. So when you are in a state, an anxious state, let me write this backwards. Sometimes you get anxious about being anxious because seemingly it's outside of your control, and also it's pretty uncomfortable. And then thanks for the comment about the shirt. Yeah, I mean, I'm doing my best out here. I'm wearing my jammy shorts and then whatever shirt I feel like. Okay, so back to work. You have an experience of being anxious, and I'm going to use that word, and it can again mean worrying or overthinking or something like that, and it's generally pretty uncomfortable. You likely have a feeling or an experience about being anxious, which might also be more anxiousness. What if somebody notices that I'm anxious? Why can't I control this? What's wrong with me? Is this always going to be this way? I can't remember if I've said this in other episodes yet, but this is where you can gain ground and fast by letting this bottom state be okay. So if you notice that you're uncomfortable, instead of being afraid of being uncomfortable or thinking it's bad or wrong or being mad about it, just let it be okay. So see if you can validate that bottom state of anxiety, worry, or overthinking by just taking a big old breath when you're in that experience and say something like, "It's okay, babe. We're okay. It's real cute when you're worried like this. I love when you're worried like this. Let's take a few breaths. Oh, did you look at, hey, listen, there's a bird outside. What's that over there on the wall?" Address the underlying state, not by trying to talk you out of why you're worried, not saying that you're bad. Don't try to reason with you about what you're anxious about, if you even know what it is. Distract you, calm your body, breathe around it, and do your best to allow it to be okay. So one perspective I've used for myself and for clients where it's applicable that helps make it okay is if you can see that you have a lot of that, it generally means that you have access to a lot of life force, a lot of energy. It's just trapped. So the flip side of high anxiety is high creative potential. And so when you're in an experience of anxiety, if you can say wow, I must be really, I must have a lot of life, a lot of energy flowing through me if I'm this uncomfortable. And that little tweak can be enough to change being afraid of it to being welcoming or accepting of it. I've probably said this a jillion times over the years, but just in case I haven't, here for you to hear, I think of high energy, high life force as having a super powered fire hose. And when you first in the cartoons where they have the firemen with the fire hoses, the fire hose shoots the firemen all over. They're wailed every which way because they're not able to manage like that much force through the hose. So if it's kind of like you're learning how to stand and direct that intentionally. And when you think about it, like how incredible that you have that much, again, like you have that much life force flowing through you, and you can learn to intentionally point it. Oh, for me, anxiously trying to control the form a blessing comes in instead of surrendering to the flow. Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, it's really interesting when you look at what you're actually worried about. I think it's Krishnamurti, but it might be somebody else who says that all things are like doing anything for something is essentially escapism. And it's like you're right here, and if you're worried about what might not be in the next here, you're not really here. And so it's this intricate, layered series of not being here because maybe something won't be where somewhere a little later. It's a little silly, but it's great to have just kind of the mindfulness or the awareness to be like, hey, what are we doing? Hey guys, what are we doing? You call all your, I think of mental bandwidth as employees. So you call all your employees home, you sit them down, and you're like, okay, so you're thinking about that, you're doing that, and none of that actually contributes to what we're trying to do or what we want to feel. Okay, another perspective that can help loosen the grip of anxiousness is to recognize a lot of that thinking is just a learned pattern. It's not because of something, you just learned it. And the example that came to me this morning was paint. So imagine that you were a painter. You spent hours and hours and hours of painting. And so you got really interested in colors and really paid attention to how things are painted. If you've been through some shit in your life, some pain, discomfort, lack, etc., it's kind of the same thing. So what I'm saying is that if you have been a painter, when you look out onto the world, you think about paint, you see paint, you see colors, and you're always, kind of contemplating and rolling through colors, paint, what choice did the artist or the painter make here? Like, you're always thinking about paint. But you wouldn't think about that except that you've had the experience of a painter. Similarly, if you've been through some shit, and some of the shit that you might have been through is just uncomfortable thinking that then got its own legs, you then look out into the world and start to process it in that way. Oh, where might I be hurt? Where is there a threat? When might I not have enough? You look out into the world and you see things through that lens because it's practiced, not because it's something in and of itself. Maybe if the painter had actually been a professional Lego builder or, a chef, when they looked out into the world, they'd see those things instead. So it's a habit of thinking that seems real because it's, pretty consistent. It's always happening. You're interacting with that information, but you wouldn't do it except for that you have the habit or the practice of it, which is to say that, it as a body of thinking, like anxiety as an experience in itself is like, sometimes I hear people take it on as like a me thing. There's something wrong with me. There's something I need to, no, you just learn to think that way. And like, God bless you, most people did. Watch the news. The news is like, danger. And so we take that idea, that template, that practice of thought, and put it on things. Danger, they might, think that you're stupid. You might forget to do this. You might, you might miss out on life. So it's not, the thoughts that you're having have really nothing to do with you except for that you've practiced having them, which means that there's more space between who you are and what's happening, that you can kind of like like you can make even more room in there during a thought storm. There are signs in New Orleans that said something about brainstorm, and I was like, oh, that's a great way to describe it. When you're in a brainstorm, just having the awareness to remember that partly, like, it's just the practice of having it, which means it's not something in and of itself. The guy who thinks about paint all the time, it's not something in and of itself. He just practiced it. And so if you practiced fear thinking, if you practiced worrying, it's just a practice. And so you retrain that practice towards appreciation. And it sounds really silly, but it is just training your brain for the good stuff. So when I'm working with clients, sometimes I'll teach them to throw a good job party. So rather than put themselves to bed at night thinking about all the shit that went wrong or all the shit they didn't do or they could do better, give yourself a good job party. Oh, I really liked that I put the dishes away instead of left them on the counter. You know, it was a little uncomfortable to tell them no, but I did it and I had a good time. Like, throw yourself a fucking good job party. It's most helpful, or it seems easiest to remember to do it if you do it when you're doing something else. So maybe you throw a good job party on your way to work and on your way home from work, or when you take a shower, or before you go to sleep, or before you wake up. And maybe it's 20 items. So you count the whole way over your fingers and the whole way back. I did a good job with, I liked the line I said to my friend today. I did a good job with taking my time, eating my lunch, and enjoying it. I did a good job with not being mad at me for not washing my hair. Shit, thank you. Thanks, Isaac. The comment was, I think your talks have more structure than you realize. Thank you. Okay, so that practice is taking, like, the good job party practice is taking the habit of thinking about what's wrong, which is just a practice as well, and taking that horsepower and putting it somewhere else. And I think of it too, kind of like, let's say that you have some woods behind your house. If you're always walking the same way on the woods, it wears down. And then let's say there's a little bit of an incline or a decline. When there's rain, it runs down where it's clear. It's the same thing with your head. Wherever you think the most, it gets worn down. And when there's an influx of energy or emotion, it just runs down those trails. They wouldn't be there except for that they're there. And I think when you're having the experience of anxiety, again, there's something it seems more real than that, meaning it seems like, oh, this is the path in the woods. And it's like, well, it is a path in the woods because it's been walked a lot. Questions, thoughts, feelings, comments. And then the last perspective I have today is, here's a moment, and around it I have no, okay, and yes. One way to retrain anxious thinking is to train the fuck out of your no. A lot from what I found from my personal experience and with my clients, a lot of their discomfort or their anticipation of discomfort is because something happened to their no along the way, where they learned to not say no when they meant no. And so they're kind of like bracing for somebody to take something from them, or for them to take on more than they mean to or want to, or they don't trust themselves to leave somewhere where they're uncomfortable, or to advocate for what they want or need. If you learn how to say no when you mean no, a lot of that anxious thinking anxious energy can ground as well, because you can trust you that if you need to advocate for yourself, you will. And so you're not living in anticipation of the discomfort you might experience if you don't. Does that make sense? Okay, so today I talked about a few perspectives to help manage anxiety, worry, and overthinking. And I said that you can look at it kind of as a good sign. It means you've got a lot of life force that you're tapped into and you're just learning how to direct it. I talked about recognizing that a lot of that thinking is only because you practice thinking it. So I use the example of somebody who painted or was a painter. When they look out in the world, they're always thinking about colors. Oh, that's a nice yellow, that's a nice this. They wouldn't do that except for they had all that time painting. And so if you've had trauma or lack, and you might have had trauma from overthinking, that becomes its own thing. It's recognizing that pattern of thinking, that pattern of focus, the pattern of looking for stuff that could go wrong and worrying about it isn't something except for that it's been practiced, which gives you a little space to say like, oh, this isn't me. This isn't me. There's nothing wrong with me. I just practice looking for threats. And to balance that, then you can practice looking for things to appreciate or shit that's funny. I can't say enough about you have your 5 physical senses, the 6th sense, and man, the sense of humor. This will do stuff the other ones can't. So if you find, you basically just want to take the time to notice when you're walking down a path in the mind woods, only because it's the most comfortable, you've been there the most often, you know where it is. You say oh, I don't really like this path, and then you practice walking a new one. So when you're walking a new path into the woods, it's a little uncomfortable, right? There's still some underbrush, maybe some overbrush. You're not really sure where you're going. That's okay. If you take it on in the awareness that it is uncomfortable, then it's less uncomfortable and can become a little bit more like an adventure. And then the last technique I talked about, last perspective, is training the fuck out of your no. So when you are just uncomfortable in your moment, sometimes that anxious thinking is about the later, where you're afraid you won't say no when you mean no. And likely you're not thinking, oh, what if I don't say no? It's likely not very, it's likely not very clear. And I say that a lot when we're looking at the head stuff. I'm like, you probably don't know you think this, but it's there. Those underlying reasons for thinking are a few layers down, and if you can work with those, and that's what I call, metaphysics, when you can work with those underlying reasons, then the stuff on the surface changes. If you keep trying to tackle the stuff on the surface and stuff isn't sticking, it's because there's something underlying to be addressed. And what might be underlying is fear that you won't say no when something's not right for you, because maybe you want to be nice, or you're afraid that you're supposed to say yes, or what if you're weird and nobody likes you. I cannot tell you, this practice, the learning no will prove itself pretty quickly. All of the fear, or I'd say most of the fear that you would have around saying no, you'll quickly see that you get what you want and everybody else is better off when you can. So what at first seems like, no, you can't say no, you can't, you have to. When you get up close to it and you really work with it, you're like, oh, this actually generates what I thought the other stuff was doing. And just like with the example of walking a new thought path in the woods, it's a little uncomfortable at first because your body is wired to get along, go along. And if you're awkward or uncomfortable about it, it helps to acknowledge that rather than push that aside. When I was retraining a lot of my communication patterns, I'd say this shit crazy, but I'm gonna tell you anyway. Or I'd bring in notes of stuff I was afraid to say so that I wouldn't have to just will myself. So support where you are by letting that be where you are. I love the underline. Before my Friday classes, my participants have a homework assignment to do 5 minutes of silent reflection. Before they start, I have them write down what they think they are thinking about, and then after they write down what they actually thought about. Thinking of what they are thinking about, and then after write down what they, that is, man, that's so good. That's so good. So you're saying that you have them write down what they think and then write down why you think they think that. That's so good. That's really great. Yeah, that level of reflection is so helpful because, again, when you can't get change on, it's that whole, you can't solve the problem on the level it was created. Well, how you perceive things is really where the problem is generated, because you wouldn't see it as a problem except for how you're looking at it. And so when you change that, what you see, you guys know this one, I won't go further. Especially because all my words are getting jumbled. That concludes my presentation for today. I really appreciate everybody being out. Again, thank you so much for the feedback. It is super helpful for me to hear what is working, what's not working. I didn't start seeing who wanted to be in my life by making my unavailable. Grant, I feel like I'm not following the whole. Are you saying that you didn't see who wanted to be in your life until until you weren't available? Is that it? Okay, I didn't start seeing who wanted to be in my life until you started making yourself unavailable. Yeah, I think that would be a change in perspective. Okay. Yeah. I think, let's see. How do I want to respond to that? There would be some fear there and allowing yourself to see. I don't know if that was an intentional choice to make yourself unavailable or not. It can be scary at first to see what is, but it does make everything else function better when you're working with what is. So knowing that probably changed the choices that you were making and how you were investing yourself, or maybe how you ultimately wanted to. And it seems like the better your life fits and the realer or more on the ground it is, the more comfortable it is. Because you're not stretching to get something that's not yours, or you're not shrinking to fit something that's not yours. You're just like doing you. And it does, it can be, like I said, a little scary to allow those changes to take place. Because what if there's nothing where there was something? Like, what if there's a void? But it seems like shit fills in a really lovely way. So good for you, and thanks for adding that. And Guy, if you want to jump and follow him, he's a wonderful artist and has a really cool technique of dotting points. That's beautiful, and he can describe it better than I can. All right, thanks so much everybody for coming. Again, thanks for letting me know what works, what doesn't work, what you'd like to hear, what you don't want to hear. And I do work one-on-one with people if you're interested in exploring some of these concepts for yourself. People ask me, I don't know if it's like the season or what, but yeah, I used to think I did everything by myself, and it's a cute illusion, but you can. And so teaming with people, especially on your perspective, can be super helpful, whether they're a friend that you trust, or somebody in the biz, or like kind of the exercise that Shauna said about writing what you think and then writing why you think that can be super helpful, where you're continuously feeling suffering, to get up out beyond it. Okay, thanks so much for coming. I want to wrap this up. I said no to people who want. Good for you. All right, bye.